Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, can I remind you, as I have done in the last few meetings, about the fact that this meeting is going to be recorded and could be webcast. That means that you may all be on camera, and that includes the public gallery. So if you're sitting there, you may find that you will be viewed by the public. You need to be aware that we may use these images for training purposes as well. And we also need to remind you that the chair has the discretion to terminate or suspend the filming if continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings, or continuing filming might infringe the rights of any individual. I need to remind you to use your microphones at all time. If you are speaking, you need to put your microphone on, because otherwise the camera may turn to you and then there'll just be no sound. And also, if you are wanting to speak, you will only be able to speak through the chair. So please don't just press your microphone. You need to indicate that you want to speak, and once you've done that, wait to be called by the chair. And then I think the only other thing to say is, oh yes, I need to remind you that if you are moving or seconding a motion, you need to use your microphone then as well, so that we can record accurately who has done that. And I think that's all. Thank you. I'll hand back to the Mayor.
Wednesday, the 5th of November. Our first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yes, Mr Mayor, we've received apologies from Councillor Leighton Smart.
Councillor Lisa Mitten as well, then, please.
No other apologies. We go on to item number 2, declarations of interest. I remind councillors of A and B. Councillor Smith.
Yes, Mr Mayor, item 29 and item 30. I'm a member of the Leisure Trust.
Councillor Galsworthy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to declare interest on the same 2 items as Councillor Smith.
Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd like to declare on item 26 a bit for profit scheme, profit scare. I can't speak tonight. It's a good start, and I'm going to be speaking quite a bit as well. I'd like to declare an interest on item 26 a bit for profit share. I'm the chair of Pentre Bark Labour Club football team.
Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'd like to declare an interest in item number 26, a bit for profit share, as my son is in the military.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest in item 26, the bit for profit sharing scheme, because I was an ex-serviceman.
Right. Well, I have to declare an interest myself, because we have a mayoral duty at 7 o'clock. So if the meeting carries on past there, I'm afraid I will have to vacate the chair and hand it over to Councillor Isaac. Right, councillors, item number 4, the Care and Social Services Inspectorate Annual Review and Revaluation Performance. This is going to be presented by Anne Ferris and Denise Moultrie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry I don't have any Welsh, but I am a Celt, so I think that counts. I'm going to do a short presentation, probably for about 15-20 minutes, which is looking back at the annual review of the performance of social services over the past year. The actual report was published last Friday, and this is just really the key elements from that I'm going to be looking at. Because of the fact that we're looking back over the past year, clearly progress has been made. There are a number of caveats. We're looking at information possibly up to maybe 18 months old. On the basis of this report, what we've looked at and what we've taken into account has been we've undertaken 2 inspections this year. We did a review in adult services around commissioning, and that was a number of local authorities were involved in that in adult services. And all local authorities, including Merthyr, were subject to an inspection of looked after children and care leavers who displayed risky and complex behaviours. So that has formed a fairly large part of the report itself. In gathering this evidence and in getting to the stage of having a report to publish, we take into account obviously the Director's report. That's very much key in terms of the progress that's made and how the authority is moving forward. We get a number of head of service reports from assistant directors and heads of service. We look at the performance indicators that you would have, statutory performance indicators that you would have provided to Welsh Government. However, I think it's important to say that we don't look at those in isolation, and they only give us really a perspective and a signpost to it's really what lies beneath that really is the important thing. We work closely with people like Wales Audit Office, Eston Health Inspectors Wales, and we have regulatory inspectors who come in and inspect things like your care at home service, domiciliary care, fostering services, care homes, etc. So we utilise all of that information, and we hold engagement meetings with the senior management team about every 3 months. The report is set out in a number of domains, and that goes from getting help to capacity, and each section of it looks at areas of progress and areas for improvement. And I think as well it's important to say that where there are areas for improvement, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a particularly negative place that the authority is at in any particular, in relation to any particular service or issue. It often means that you're on a journey of improvement. And when we go through, we'll see sometimes where it has been identified that there is an area of progress, and it also is flagged up as an area for improvement as well. So it's really about where the authority is on that particular journey. I'm hoping this works because I'm not awfully au fait with technology. This year we have included responses to last year's areas of improvement. So if I just quickly look at those. In terms of integrated family support, that was identified as one of the priorities in the Director's report. And while I was writing this, the Council were still finalising the first year's report on that. And I know it's not going to be made publicly available, but I think we're going to get a chance to have a look at that. Policies and planning in relation to under 8 daycare settings. This has been a historical issue that I think I'm probably going to take off. There's been a historical policy in planning in the local authority around childminders, where if there are more than 3 children, a planning application has to be made, is my understanding, and that doesn't sit with our regulations around having 6 children, that can be minded in a domestic setting, and it's just really it's just an economic form of childcare really. But that's a decision that's really outside of certainly social services, I understand. In terms of delayed transfers of care, that's risen over the last year, and I know that at some stage during the period of last year, there's certainly been a change in the landscape in terms of the number of care homes, in terms of the number of beds that there are on ComTAF. So that would contribute to that rise, and I know certainly that's being looked at. I think last year as well, or during the course of the year, there's been more clarity around who does what and whose role is what in relation to healthcare, local health board and social services. There have been improvements in terms of the fostering service. There are some improvements identified, but different processes have been included. Management has changed, and that's down as one of the areas for of progress for this year. One of the areas for improvement was clearly or for development, not improvement, was continued focus on children in need and the preventative agenda. And certainly, as we'll find out later in the report, the local authority has made great headway in relation to that. Performance around statutory visits for children. There's an expectation that on the number of visits that children receive who are being looked after, and that has improved by 20% this year, and is within the Welsh averages that you would expect. Carers, in terms of the carers, you've got a fabulous strategy that you've launched, a multi-agency strategy a few years ago. There's still, I think, there's still an acknowledgement that there needs to be some progress in that, and it's been identified as one of the priorities, I think, in Merthyr Tydfil for this coming year. that's an issue. The whole issue around carers is an issue throughout the whole of Wales, so it's certainly not something that's just pertinent to Merthyr Tydfil. In terms of financial planning and budget management, overall social services per head in Merthyr are the third highest, have the third highest spend in relation to people. So it shows the commitment that there is, even in these times of austerity. It's clearly people who are vulnerable, both children and adults in social services, are really prioritised, and that's very positive. Ongoing development in relation to the role of social services members. There's so many changes, so much happening. There's new legislation. Safeguarding is a huge priority within the authority, and that's around. You're going to have increasing challenges all the time about having to make very, very difficult decisions, and it's about being well briefed to be able to do that. Okay. The areas, the particular domains that we've looked at, and we've done this again. It's been presented in the same way as it has been over the last number of years. Areas of progress in terms of shaping services. Huge progress in relation to the partnership work that you do. Reconfiguration of short-term input. There's an emphasis on providing care when it's most needed. Certainly the mantra seems to be give people what they need and when they need it most, and that's really what you would expect from a local authority like Merthyr, and that's really happening. The whole work, the whole partnership work and the integration work, it's got very firm footing and has been happening for quite a long time, and you're continually building on that. Clearly, the number of older people is increasing, and dependency is increasing as well. Even though we want to be, and you want to be, to drive the independence agenda, increasingly we find that there are people who've got more complex cases, who've got more complex diagnoses, and that's really difficult to be able to manage that, but the authority is managing it well. Certainly, the two new care homes that were opened in the Gurness Estate in Tree Harris, regulatory inspectors saying that they're extremely good, very high tech, state of the art, well positioned for the locality. A lot of work has gone into developing children in need service to support families, and that's around the Gettley Family Centre, and that's there's really good holistic multi-agency work going on there, and the more intensive support that you can provide in terms of preventative in the very early stages means that hopefully that you're not going to have quite so many children coming through the door at sort of a higher level, and certainly I understand the referrals have increased to that. The referrals to the centre have increased, and the really good intensive work that actually goes on there. In terms of improvements, and as I say, we put areas for improvement in everybody's report. It's not just every social services has room for improvement, and Merthyr isn't any exception in that. And it's about there has been an acknowledgement, and it's interesting. We've been speaking about dementia services earlier. It's been recognised by all, and again, it's an all Wales thing about people getting older, about there being a gap in service in terms of people are living longer, want to be more independent, have more complex needs. Will get dementia, as we've heard. There'll be a significant number of people, and of course, the more older people there are, the more needs there will be in relation to that. So that's really an area that is being developed, that has been identified, and that will continue to be developed. And then something around the local authority has done some work with Social Service Improvement Agency around developing outcomes and measuring outcomes for families. And actually it's the same in relation to adult services. It's about what success have we had, how do we measure success, and what has the impact of us being involved in a child's life or an older person's life? What has that meant in terms of the added quality of life that people have, and that children and families have? Getting help. You've developed a multi-intervention assistant, the MIA website, and that, as well as providing the range of information and guidance to families and professionals, is I've not had the opportunity to look at it, but I understand that it's an up-to-date way of communicating, and certainly if you haven't already, you're planning to, I understand, have a bilingual parenting site. so that means that you're meeting some aspects as well of the Welsh Language Act, which is important. Another area of progress in adult services is the development of the care facility at Twycombe, and that offers better opportunities and choice again to people who need it in the short term, and when they need some help, they're able to access and they're able to get to that, and that's just hugely important. And hugely important because it gives people the opportunity, and it gives carers a chance for respite, but it gives people the opportunity to just have that little bit of extra input for a period of time, and then continue with on their independence journey. There's certainly, and I've mentioned it, and this is a thread, the commitment in terms of the integration agenda. Having one location, people having personal choice, having their independence promoted, multi-agency working together, avoiding duplication of services. I mean, that's all. It's just a reflection of true partnership and what true partnership really means. And I think as well, increasingly the work of the third sector in terms of working with you, that's going to be hugely important in getting different funding streams, for instance, those sorts of things that you're going to have to think out of the box, and Merthyr isn't afraid to think out of the box and really put yourselves forward for new things and for trying things out. And that's probably the beauty of being a compact authority. There are the opportunities to do that, maybe more than other authorities. Getting help in terms of improvement, improved performance in relation to reviews undertaken in adult services. 3 out of 4 people had their in adults had reviews undertaken, which are undertaken on an annual basis. It's not as good as it was last year, and it's below the Welsh average, and it's just important that people have their needs reviewed, so that we're absolutely sure that what we're providing is what people need and what people want, and what's going to increase their quality of life. Work with health colleagues. When we undertook our inspection in relation to looked after children, what we found was that there was an over-reliance in relation to social services had to pick up some things that we felt that CAM should have been picking up. So social services are really filling the gap there and shouldering that. And again, it's something that we have noted across other local authorities, that not just something that's happening in Merthyr, but that time that's spent doing that could be spent doing other things that in relation to roles. Services provided, certainly good systems in place, lots of strategic partnerships working, and that's and I think that's built on formal and informal relationships that there are and that there have been. Again, I think because Merthyr is the local authority that Merthyr is, people know each other, individuals know each other, information shared formally and shared informally as well. And I mean, that's hugely important really, to be able to do that and have the confidence to do that. And that's what building relationships is all about. And it's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that's very important, and that you have to work really hard at, and Merthyr do that extremely well. In terms of children's services, the authority has excuse me, developed a marketing, recruitment and retention strategy around for fostering services, and again there are challenges in meeting the needs of 11 plus, of young teenagers, of getting appropriate foster placements for them that are right for them. And particularly when you have got children who are, it's a difficult age anyway, but particularly if you've got children who've got very, very challenging behaviour, or who've got very, very complex needs, it's very, very hard to get that sorted. So that's an area of progress, but you'll see it's an area for further development further on. The local authority, the council commissioned an independent review with IPC, the Institute of Public Care, which looked at again the integration and acknowledged the progress that was made at all levels on a local level. And I think what that report was clearly saying was the local authority needs to continue to build on that and to build on the partnership arrangements that you have. So you have the building blocks in place, and it's just a case of continuing with that. And I mean, you can see that, you know, since this has been written, you can see that that's actually happening, and that things are progressing. And really, it's with the challenges that all local authorities face, it's clearly the only way to go. It's, you know, we must think of innovative ways of doing things with less money, really. Our regulatory inspectors have reported that there's really good quality in-house home care services. The service users that we speak to, and we speak to those on every inspection, spoke very, very positively and very warmly about the fact that people know what their needs are, that they know them, that they see that there's continuity in terms of carers, and that doesn't always happen. That doesn't always happen in terms of services for people at home. But it's really important. And again, I suppose looking back at the dementia discussion that we were having, it's about, for people, for instance, with dementia, knowing who's coming, knowing who's going to be knocking at the door. That's just hugely, hugely important. And Merthyr manages to do that very well. Services provided in terms of areas for improvement. Because of the fact that it's a small council, it's a small authority, you don't have the teams of people to be able to monitor contracts in great depth, or you don't have loads of commissioners around, sort of standing around ready to commission services. And in fact, that in terms of numbers, there aren't a huge amount of services that need to be commissioned, but it's really about strengthening that, about looking differently at that and being clear about what you're commissioning, and keeping an eye in terms of monitoring happening. But it could be better, and I know in fact that you have as well made some progress in relation to that, particularly around children's services. You have your recruitment and marketing strategy that we talked about earlier around foster carers. It's about implementing that, and it's about making sure that that's a reality and that that's happening. And again, it's not that there are huge numbers of children, but it's just that their needs are so specific that it's a very difficult job, and it's a very time-consuming job, and it's just so important to get it right if the lives of children are going to be, our youngsters are going to improve, outcomes are going to improve for them. So that's hugely important. Effect on people's lives in terms of areas of progress. The one thing about Merthyr, and I've worked in Merthyr for a couple of years now, is Merthyr are always very willing to sort of stand up and say, yeah, I'll take part in that. You know, you're not afraid to sort of stand up and be counted, or in fact to be there at the beginning of something and help that shape the way you think, or the way in fact you provide services, or whatever that might be. And that was around improving life chances for children. So it's hugely important, and there's a real commitment to doing that. One of the things when I was here earlier in the year, looking at the looked after children, was I was very impressed by the consultation that there was with families around the early intervention. We spoke to a number of people who had been part of, or are part of, or were part of the Rainbow Group. We spoke to I remember one in particular, one very eloquent young lady, I think who was at university, who was, I think, on the corporate parenting board, who really felt that her voice was heard. And the group that we spoke to were saying, well, you know, we know we're listened to, actually we're part of this board. And again, I'm not sure that there are very many authorities who actually have that much, and where children and young people, and rightly so, have that much of a voice. And that's again, it's very important, it's very, very commendable, and it's just it's the way of the future. And when we're talking about children's lives, it's just important that they're involved in making those decisions and getting their views heard. I know that you have been involved in delivering awareness training for members and employees around safeguarding, and that's certainly one of the things that came through the Director's report about the fact that safeguarding is everybody's concern, and it doesn't matter who you are, what, you know, in Merthyr, it's everybody's concern, and you have a role to play in that, and that's very much a key message, and that is certainly worth the input that it has, because again, you know, training takes time, workshops take time, but it's I think it's time certainly well spent and pays dividends. You have developed some accommodation for care leavers, and I can't recall the name of it, for 16 to 25-year-olds, chaplains, and that's a really positive start. There's more work, I think, to be done on that. There's more opportunity. Well, you need, I think, more opportunities for developing accommodation for that group of people. The council, I'm sorry, I'm racing through this, but I'm just very aware of the time. In terms of areas for improvement, transitional arrangements to ensure young people entering adulthood have their needs appropriately met. And that's really going back to the thing I was talking about children with complex needs, about the supported accommodation, about engagement with lots of services that are around. It's again, it's something that's going to be ongoing. And of course, you know, as I said, these are fundamentally the most difficult people to place or to provide services for or to progress with. So that's a really difficult one. Understand the reasons behind the poor uptake of support to carers. The reason that's in there was I did come and I actually went to your carer strategy network, and I had really good feedback from the people who were there. And I know that everybody has been offered, in terms of carers, has been offered an assessment, but for some reason people aren't taking it up. And they're just so important, and I know that it's important and it's a priority to the council as a whole, because that clearly comes through, and it must be very frustrating if you can't get to the bottom of why that's happening. And I know that questionnaires are going, and probably have gone out, in fact. But again, it's an issue that sort of happens through a number of local authorities, so it's not just something particular to Merthyr, but the fact that you've got a really good strategy, you've got good people who know what they're doing leading it, and people still aren't taking up services. Good in terms of young carers, I think. Not huge numbers, but yeah, it's happening. Monitor the levels of delayed transfers of care closely over the coming year. And again, I know that some of that has been due to things like closure of a home, fewer beds, people with more complex needs. It's a difficult one. It's always a difficult one, but it's important to keep monitoring that and see what the reasons are behind it. Capacity. One of the things that I felt for the number of I think it's been 3 years since I've been in Merthyr Tydfil, and there's always been really good leadership. Leaders are always visible. I mean, again, I think probably the size of the authority lends itself to that, but it's always very clear that there's support. When we have our engagement meetings with the senior management team, they always talk about the support that both they give and they receive from staff, and that goes a long way, I think, in difficult and challenging times like this. You've got a long-standing, skilled and competent workforce, and you've got local people who know the local culture, and who, in fact, I think particularly in children's services, know lots of the families, maybe second, third generation, and that sort of knowledge of the locality is hugely important. We've talked a bit about the focus on outcomes, the work that you've done with Social Service Improvement Agency, and about moving that agenda forward. Excuse me. There is a willingness within the council to do that, and it's just important that that we make a mark on, that we know what in fact we're doing and how we have improved the lives of either children or old people. So it's not just process driven. Areas for improvement. Continued focus on delivering outcomes in both children and adult services. Provide the necessary support and leadership to the management team until the new leadership team is fully embedded. Significant changes recently, and which will mean significant challenges in the immediate future. And it's just really, and you know, you are clearly mindful of that. And closely monitor the impact of decisions made around withdrawal of services in response to reducing budgets. Again, with the austerity measures, it's about being mindful, and I know that when we do have to, when there are challenges in terms of budgets, etc., and pushes to reduce those, and we can't be all things to all people. It's just really about thinking that through, and thinking really what the impact might be of that on people, and how that might affect their quality of life. And again, you know, you are doing it. You do it. You know, your managers tell us, but it's just really to keep that in mind, because it's going to continue. The council's strong corporate support for the work of social services. Again, that comes through all of the all of the time when we're having discussions, whether it's with your senior management team or your managers, your your social workers. That very clearly comes through, and I mean it's very much indicated in the director's report as well about the commitment. And you can tell as well by things like the commitment of finances that there is to children's services. That says something in a very difficult, challenging financial times that you still have that. Good understanding of the role and responsibilities associated with corporate parenting. Well-established corporate parenting board. People on that board who are briefed, who know the children you're talking about. Areas for improvement. Continue to drive forward the integration agenda in the borough, which you're doing at a pace, and just that's hugely important in terms of being on firm footing to meet the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and to maintain, as I'm sure you will, a focus on raising awareness around safeguarding and corporate parenting, because that's just the bread and butter really of what we do and the expectations of us as employees, as councillors, as members of the public really in Merthyr Tydfil. And I think that's me. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you. Right. Any questions? No. Any comments? Councillor Carter?
Yeah, that's if there's no comments from members, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take the opportunity to sum it up. Yep. And I'd like to express my thanks, Anne, for joining us tonight to present the Care and Social Service Inspector's review of how social services functions for 2013-14. The full report is published on the CSSIW website and is helpful for Anne to take us through it in summary tonight, identifying some of the key pointers. It's pleasing to note that our Social Services Department has continued to perform well alongside increased demand and the numerous challenges that working with vulnerable adults and children bring. The report also notes there are some areas for improvement over the next year, many of which are already in the current plans for the service. I'd like to take this opportunity as well to thank the staff in the service for their continued commitment and hard work. There are many challenges facing us going forward, not least all the financial context. Likely further increases in demand and the implementation of the new Social Services and Wellbeing Act. It's good to note, however, that we have a good solid base which to go forward. So Anne, thank you very much for coming tonight.
It is usual practice to ask you if you wanted to stop for the rest of the meeting. No? You're welcome to sit in the gallery. Right, item number... Oh. Oh. That one, yeah. Yeah.
Somebody just needs to move.
There's a report. So.
Right. There is a report associated with item number 4. Also to consider the report of the Director of Social Services. It's on page 1. Councillor Carter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The report summarises the findings of the report which has just been presented to Council. The final report was received last Friday and is now published on the CSSIW website. This review links to the Director of Social Services annual report, which was published in June 2014 and came to Council on the 9th of July 2014. I'd like to draw Council's attention to the recommendation contained in section 6 of the report on page 4, namely that the contents of the report be noted and that a copy of the CSSIW annual review and evaluation of performance for 2013-14 be made available to all councillors.
Right, I'll open this for any debate. Is there a seconder?
That was Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? I'm afraid, councillors, our system have broken down and we're going back to an old-fashioned show of hands. So I must ask for a show of hands for this motion. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And members, I think you're probably feeling presentation overload. So we will do this in 10 minutes. And I will make the offer to you that when the Recovery Board meets, if you want to come and talk to us about any of the detail, we'll make that offer to you so that your business can be conducted this evening. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an idea. We've been in Merthyr for about 18 months, and it's only fair, really, to talk to all members to tell them what we think the progress has been and where the future lies. This is a work in progress, and if you want a summary for this report, it's a work in progress, and I know the leader has told me he believes that and that there's more progress to be made. But there is some good progress too, and that needs to be noted as well. So if I take you through the recommendations one by one, but I'll do it fairly quickly. The first recommendation said just improve children's attainment, basically. And there's been a marked improvement in children's attainment. It has gone up markedly over the 2 years since your inspection. You have higher expectations in your schools, and there's some evidence of more effective interventions from the consortium. There's also evidence that the board has seen of the appointment of a CEO and departmental development. When you move on, though, to recommendation 2, you can also see that enhanced challenge in schools is a feature now of practice in Merthyr Tydfil. The persistent challenge has not been easy, and reactions have not always been good to that challenge. But that persistent challenge must continue. It's really important, and it's what has delivered the progress so far. There's also evidence of improved leadership and management, both in the authority and in schools, and the local authority responding to the needs of schools around things like HR capacity. But that isn't a done deal yet, and there's more still to do. But good progress so far, with more to do in terms of recommendation 2. In terms of recommendation 3, better strategies for NEET children, well, we think your strategy for NEETs is good. We also think that the strategies you're taking on attendance, even though they've caused a dip in the data, are likely to deliver well for you in the long term. And therefore, again, you're in the middle part of this intervention, and you are making the progress you'd expect to see in the middle part, but there's still work to do. But you should be happy about the distance you've travelled so far. Of course, as you travel on an improvement journey, the improvements get harder and harder to get, because the early improvements are really the things that should have been happening anyway. So in this one, the NEETs one, I think you should park and really now focus under this one on attendance and on exclusions. So you're really focusing on those issues. Moving on, you needed a robust self-evaluation framework, and in many authorities, and we see this here too, when you focus on self-evaluation, seeing a lot of activity is often thought of as a product of improvement, i.e. there's lots going on, so we must be doing well. And what we're saying much more to you is, even if there's lots going on, can you prove it's having an impact on the kids out there in the street? Can they give you feedback that things are getting better, or are examination results or test results or literacy and numeracy strategies actually showing you those changes? So whilst we know that a huge amount of activity has gone on around self-evaluation, improving things, we're still looking to say, make sure the follow-through is there. Doesn't matter how many audits you conduct, those audits don't improve things. It's what you do afterwards. I hope that makes sense to you. Recommendation 5, more rigorous scrutiny framework. We think there's been very, very good progress indeed. We think that scrutiny here is probably some of the best we've seen now and is really holding people to account. My advice to any scrutineers here would be keep that focus on, can the officers demonstrate what they do in here in the Civic Centre actually is delivering for children on the ground. And you might want to think of having children involved in your scrutiny on occasions, giving you first-hand feedback. Recommendation 6, ensure that data on the needs and attainment of people with additional needs is developing. Well, you've got a review going on in process at the moment, and I'm not going to prejudge what the outcome of that review may be. It will be a challenging review, and we will be trying to support you over the next 6 to 8 months as that review moves through. I've done now 8 reviews of either special educational needs or ALN needs, and they're not easy things to do. 8 in different areas, different authorities. So we will work with you on that review to develop and deliver that. And also the issues around the youth service. We know that you've had Estin looking at what goes on in the youth service, and we know that the youth service has shown improvement. But again, there's still work to do there. I have to say the youth service work isn't as high a priority for us or for Estin as getting GCSE results up and literacy and numeracy results up. And then finally, value for money strategies. And again, this was the last recommendation for you. And basically what we're saying to you here is it's very difficult to argue you're not delivering high, good value for money if your examination results are good. And if your examination results aren't very good, it's very difficult to argue you're getting good value for money. And therefore focus on that, what's happening to kids and what's going on in terms of how the examination results are working. And your value for money systems will follow. By this time next year, I've said in this particular presentation, you should therefore see the same level of improvement carrying on in your schools, the same level of improvement both in terms of examination results and pupil progress, because the two things are totally different. You should be getting more positive Estin monitoring visits. And the area we really are interested in as a recovery board now in working with you is how do you then make what you're doing sustainable? You have 2 very gifted officers working, leading your change programme. How do you put a framework round those 2 officers to make sure they continue to deliver? How do you make sure in these very, very difficult times that the resources you need are going to sustain what you're doing? And we've made an offer in January to actually do some workshopping around that rather than having the papers presented and us challenging. To really start saying, well, how does what's happened in Merthyr over the last 2 years become locked into place so that absolutely you can guarantee it's going to deliver? Chairman, I've gone through that very, very quickly to give a little time for questions. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to give you that sort of feedback. The real message is this is an unfinished work, and it's that strategic locking in of the progress you've made so far that's our big job for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I open up for debate. Any questions? Any comments? I call on Councillor Jones.
If there are no comments, I'll come in at the end. Okay? Can I then, Gareth, on behalf of the Council, thank you for an extremely interesting presentation. Although it was short, and you purposely kept it short, I know, it was really, if you look at it in the detail, the 8 recommendations, it was basically telling us where we were in a nutshell. And you termed it as work in progress. I don't think you could have given it a better description. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I'd hate to think that members now believe that because we've come so far, the battle is over, that we can now sit back. It's always my practice now and again to sit down and look back on the Estin report to see how bad things were before you came into this council chamber. And just a short paragraph to remind members, in case they've forgotten where exactly you were coming from when you moved in here. And what the Estin report of November 2012 said, the local authority does not have in place a robust and ongoing self-evaluation process for its education services. Looking at where we are today, I find it an incredible, unbelievable, use what adjectives you want to describe, that was totally wrong. We should never have allowed it to get into that situation. It is too reliant upon evaluation and challenge from regulators, inspectors and consultants to tell them how well they had been doing. That, again, it makes me sit back and think, where the heck were we at that point in time? As a consequence, it does not know itself well enough. And you spoke about the 8 recommendations, Garak. Certainly, we've got to grips with 1, 2, 3 and 5. We're working on the others, as we are still working on 1, 2, 3 and 5. But the evidence is there on 1, 2, 3 and 5 for any members to pick up reports to tell us where we are on those recommendations. That journey that we've come on has without doubt been due to you and your colleagues, and Carl, who was chair before you took over as chair. And I think we are now well on our way within the journey that is planned for us. And I know I speak for Brendan and the whole council when I say to you personally, thank you very much for the effort that you put into it, you and your team. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Jones. Well, thank you, Gareth, for the presentation. I remind you, if you want to stay and listen to the rest of the council meeting, you may. All right. Right, item number 6, licensing committee meeting of Wednesday the 10th of September.
Can I move the minutes of the 10th of September licensing committee, Mr. Mayor?
Have we got a seconder? Any comments? Any questions? Any comments? Right, I'll put it to the vote. Gentlemen, please vote. No? No?
Yes, it was only that we didn't have it on for that one.
That's carried.
Councillor Harvey Jones
Harvey Jones.
and Councillor Graham Davis.
Graham Davis.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, that's carried. 7, full council meeting of Wednesday the 10th of September.
Yes, move, Mr. Mayor.
Mover.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second. Have we got any questions? Any comments? Can I ask for a show, please, councillors? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 8. Democratic Services of Monday the 15th of September. Are we a mover? Seconder.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Any questions? Any comments? Right, councillors, can I ask you to vote, please? That's carried. Thank you. The licensing committee meeting of Wednesday the 17th of September. Mover. Oops.
Try again.
Sorry, Councillor.
Can I move the minutes of the licensing committee of the 17th of September, Mr Mayor?
Any questions? Any comments? Councillors, I ask you to vote, please.
Mr Mayor, before I move these minutes, first of all, can I move on alteration to minute number 419, which affects myself. It refers to the fact that I'm an independent member of the Community Health Council. That is incorrect. I'm an independent member of the Cwmtaf University Health Board. And in relation to minute number 421, and I've had a discussion with the head of planning and the legal department to amend the wording in that, and the wording needs to be amended to resolve that the committee were minded to refuse the application, the reasons for refusal and the names of the representatives who will represent the authority at any future appeal were requested by the legal officer. The committee requested that officers draft 2 reasons for refusal relating to visual impact and a cumulative effect to be presented to the next Planning and Regulatory Committee to be held on the 15th of October 2014 for consideration. And can I move the minutes as amended, Mr Mayor?
Is that a second? Councillor Chaplin. Any questions? Do we move that now?
Can I just be clear that all members are absolutely clear about what those amendments are? If everybody's clear, we can proceed to take the vote. Yeah.
Any comments? Right. I'll ask you to vote then, please, councillors. That's carried. Item number 11, the Audit Committee meeting of Monday the 22nd of September.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Question, Councillor Jones? No, moved, seconded. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Councillors, I'll ask you to vote, please. That's carried.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? I'll ask you to vote, please, councillors. That's carried. The Cabinet meeting of Wednesday the 24th of September.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor. Any questions? Any comments? Ask you to vote, please, councillors. That's carried. Full council of Wednesday the 24th of September.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Seconder. Second, Mr Mayor. Any questions? Any comments? Ask you to vote, please. That's carried.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Second, Mr Mayor.
That's still waiting. Oh. That's carried. Item number 17, scrutiny social services and social regeneration meeting of Tuesday the 7th of October.
Can I move, Mr Mayor?
16? Oh, sorry, missed one. Right, we go back to the scrutiny of schools meeting of Monday the 6th of October.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Seconder.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? I'll ask you to vote, please, councillors. One more.
Councillor McCarthy. Pressing.
That's carried. Now we go to item number 17.
Can I move, Mr Mayor?
Is there a seconder? Any questions? Any comments? I'll ask you to vote, please, councillors. That's carried. Cabinet meeting of Wednesday the 8th of October.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Any questions? Any comments? I'll ask you to vote then, please, councillors. That's carried.
Yes, move, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Is there Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I ask in relation to minute number 521 in the resolution there, the amount of £500 which was contained in the report is not contained in the resolution, and that the figure of £500 be included in the resolution?
All right. Any comments? All right. I'll ask you to vote on this item, please, councillors. Two more. Oh, myself. That was carried, councillors.
So we now move on to the committee reports. Item number 20,
reforming local government and voluntary merger opportunities, to consider a report of the Chief Executive, and I believe it's the leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, Council will be fully aware of the Williams Commission report that was published earlier this year, and also Welsh Government's white paper, Devolution, Democracy and Delivery, Reforming Local Government, which is part of the response to Williams. From sections 1.3 and 1.4 of the report, Council will note that Welsh Government has invited councils to help shape the future of local government by voluntarily merging with another authority by 2018 or face compulsory mergers by 2020. We've also been asked to submit proposals for voluntary mergers by the 28th of November this year. Section 2.1 through to 2.5 of the report highlights in detail the proposed timescales for mergers from the introduction of the first bill in January 2015 through to the first full round of elections for the new arrangements in May 2022, which will be for a term of 5 years that will also include new electoral divisions with the appropriate reduction of councillors as set out following the electoral review. Council will also be aware of the position of Welsh Government in that reorganisation will happen despite grave reservations from leaders from across Welsh councils and the WLGA that reorganisation cannot be rushed due to different pay and conditions of staff, different levels of council tax, different social housing arrangements, and indeed a whole raft of other matters that will need to be thought through if reorganisation will deliver better outcomes for the citizens that we serve. In moving forward, Mr Deputy Mayor, and given Welsh Government's position, and some would say ultimatum, this Council has to decide what it feels is in the best interests of the people of Merthyr Tydfil. Our decisions now will affect generations to come. Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council has a very good relationship with all other councils from across Wales, and particularly with our neighbouring councils from the Cardiff capital region of South East Wales. In fact, many long-standing leaders have told me that their relationship with Merthyr Tydfil is better now than it has been for many years. In determining the best option for Merthyr Tydfil, many factors have to be taken into account, not least the size of any new merged authority in order to deliver high levels of local accountability to the people that we serve. Merthyr Tydfil currently has a population of around 59,000, Rhondda and Taff around 34,500 and Caerphilly around 179,000. Taking this and many other factors into account, 5 of which are set out in 5.3 of the report, and also that RCT is the second largest authority in Wales, with Merthyr Tydfil being the most compact, a merger with Caerphilly County Borough Council is seen as the best possible option in moving forward in any new arrangements. Mr Deputy Mayor, the financial implications are set out in sections 6.1 through to 6.3 of the report, and Council will note that in terms of potential cost for reorganisation, currently estimates range from £80 million to £400 million across Wales. The recommendations in section 9 of the report are that 9.1, the content of the report be noted, 9.2, the contents of the white paper, Devolution, Democracy and Delivery, Reforming Local Government, be noted. 9.3, an exceptional arrangement merger is explored with Caerphilly County Borough Council as the preferred option, and discussions commence with Caerphilly County Borough Council regarding this. 9.4, should discussions with Caerphilly County Borough Council fail, the right is reserved to enter into discussions with other neighbouring authorities. And 9.5, if Council determines to explore merger, or if Council is compelled by Welsh Government at a future date to merge, that delegated authority is given to the Leader of the Council and Chief Executive to engage with counterparts in initial discussions about merger. I so move.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I second that.
Questions? Councillor Richard Thomas.
Sorry, Mr Deputy Mayor, I was deep in reading then, and I wonder if the leader could give us a little bit more detail and explain. I know that section 2 is there in terms of timescales, but I must say that I find both the white paper and the explanation there almost sort of contradictory. In section 2, it talks about May 2017 local government elections to existing councils unless the authority is unaffected by merger. And so therefore I assume, either wrongly or rightly, that if I then read section 2.4, if we were to go ahead with a voluntary merger, it's that section which would apply to us as a local authority. I mean, sympathise, Brendan, because it's probably as clear to you as it is to me in the white paper.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes, my understanding of this, Richard, is that if councils were to voluntarily merge, there would possibly be an extended term to 2018, so that indeed would include us. But as I said, there are various arrangements depending on whether councils volunteer or not. If you're forced into merger, my understanding is that elections would go ahead as is the norm in this case in May 2017. So we would, if we were able to voluntarily merge with Caerphilly, it would be extended to 2018 with a shadow authority then taking place at somewhat later on down the line.
Any comments? Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My comment is in relation to paragraph 6, the financial implications, and particularly paragraph 6.3. And it refers there to the fact that currently estimates range from 80 million to 400 million of the cost of this reorganisation. And I think in the Williams Commission it actually states 80 to 100 million. How they came to that conclusion, I don't think even members of the Williams Commission know. But there is a huge cost to this, and nobody anywhere, not even the Welsh Government, have got any idea what this is going to cost. And when we look at the cost of the Staffing Commission, the different IT systems, different council tax rates, the loss of experienced staff, at the end of the day, if this happens and the dust settles, we will not know the cost of this until several years after these new authorities come into being. And frankly, we need, going through this at this moment in time, with the multi-million pounds that each authority has to save over a period of several years, I think there are many other, not only in this council chamber, but other councillors I talk to elsewhere throughout Wales are really concerned at the implications and the further costs on top of what we've got to save.
Councillor Gareth Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Could I ask members to look, please, at 1.6? The term that's used there is coherence. I would use the term coterminosity. And I would like to point out to members that if you're looking at Caerphilly, as opposed to any other local authority, the police force there is the Gwent Constabulary. We are served by the South Wales Constabulary. In terms of the local health board that's already been mentioned, the university status there, it is Rhondda Cynon Taf. There is no coterminosity with Caerphilly there. In terms of Her Majesty's Court Service, the area that serves Merthyr now is called Rhondda Cynon Taf. It's based at Pontypridd and serves the Taff Valley, the Cynon Valley and the Rhondda Valleys. And in terms also of the educational consortia that have been mentioned tonight, again, there is no coterminosity. So I would, from my point of view, see flawed logic in going for the Caerphilly side of things. There are lots of questions that could be asked about that. But two things that came out of the meetings that we had here earlier on, in terms of the key challenges that we faced. If you look at the second speaker and what she had to say in terms of how well we were doing and the links that we have with Rhondda and Taff. Also, the third speaker talking about the work, the links with the Recovery Board and the educational consortia. Are we going to undo all the good work that's gone through? So I would just like to flag those points up from my own point of view. I've always been guided by logic, and I really don't see the logic in this particular one. And unless the exceptional circumstances are undoing all the links that we already have with our neighbours in Rhondda and Taff and making a new set with Caerphilly, then I can't really see what the other exceptional circumstances may be. But I realise that is just one opinion, and to areas like Bedlinog and Trelewis, we will be on the far rim of any galaxy, whichever we join up with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richard Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My comments really are sort of an academic argument in a way. Most people think of local authorities as a body for delivering services, which is quite right. If these sorts of moves can make more efficient delivery, less cost to delivery, then I would have no problem. But in the white paper which the Welsh Government have produced, and again this is an academic argument if you like, they talk about reforming local government and they talk about a vision for local democracy that is fit for the 21st century, and they talk about a stronger local democracy. So my point is this: we're not just a body that delivers services, we are a body which actually delivers democracy to local people. And the larger these authorities become, then the more distant democracy gets from the local resident. I know it's not something which we can take forward particularly as a council, but the nuts and bolts of all these arrangements worry me enormously. For example, in terms of local democracy, no matter who we join with, as an interim measure, we could be looking at a council of well over 100 members representing 2 existing authorities. How that will work, I really, really don't know. We could make money out of it in Merthyr Tydfil by renting out Reader Car for council meetings, but who knows. So that's my basic premise, that I worry enormously that we forget the democratic aspect of our council work. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Phil Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I worry that I actually agree with Councillor Richard Thomas on this occasion. Again, because he's absolutely right in what he's saying in terms of local democracy. Size doesn't help. If you've got a large authority, you certainly will lose that local democracy element. And those of us who've been watching closely what's happening in Scotland will see a recent report which actually says in Scotland it's best to go back to smaller authorities than to remain with the large authorities. And that's a lesson that Williams perhaps should have looked at as well. Talking about Williams, I think that was one of the flaws in the Williams report. Another flaw was, in fact, that the police authorities weren't effectively dealt with, because the argument they put about places like ours being too small could also apply to the Gwent Police Force, for example. So again, there's a trick being missed on that one. But I think the biggest one of all was, unfortunately, I think, set by our own leader in Cardiff, and that was by excluding health boards from the consideration of the Williams Commission. Because whilst I understand and agree with what Gareth's saying, the reason that we're working so closely with RCT under the Cwmtaf University Health Board is because that's the way the health board was set up. It actually doesn't work properly in terms of cross-border working. The south of Cwmtaf works very closely with the Abertawe Bro-Megannog Health Board. We work very closely with the Gwent Health Board in terms of the services from Prince Charles Hospital, and will indeed work much more closely in relation with the top end of most of the Gwent valleys when the outcome of the South Wales programme is brought into being, with Prince Charles becoming a regional centre for A&E. So there is cross-border working. There's very much indeed cross-border working between us and the Rhymney Valley, but that will extend. So whilst I understand what Gareth is saying, I think there are flaws in the Williams report. What we're trying to do is to say, well, what's the best for Merthyr Tydfil in terms of who we join up with? Our view is that it should be the Caerphilly end. Caerphilly, in my opinion, and I know this is webcasted, but in my opinion, Caerphilly is certainly a lot more progressive than RCT, and I fear also that should we become part of RCT, the politics of that authority will sink us down far below any level you can imagine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Linda Matthews.
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, the Caerphilly side also is the parliamentary boundaries go over to that side, and also the Assembly. So there is a great mixture of borders, if you like, for anything that you want to look at. I think the most important thing we should be thinking about is what is best for the people that we represent. With the number, and I'm not sure, is it 250,000 Rhondda Cynon Taf, something like that. If you add Merthyr into that, you're talking an authority almost the size of Cardiff, but the number of councillors is set to be limited at 75. So for the people in Merthyr, I'm not quite sure how many councillors will be from this side. They'll have an awful lot of work to do for a start, and their ability to represent the people may not be the best that is for those people. But anything with such a reduced number of councillors, how would we get anything over this arm, if you like, of the massive Rhondda Cynon Taf? So I think on economies of size, if you like, it is more logical for us to go with a neighbouring authority. And I'm not very good at geography, I'm terrible at it in school, but I thought that would put Bedlinog in the middle of the new authority. Yes, Bedlinog would be in the centre then of the new authorities, not on the fringe. So that may be better in that direction. But really we have to consider what is best for the people in Merthyr. And I don't think a merger into an authority of that size is the answer.
Councillor Tovey.
Thanks. Well, I believe in the health service, because it's Rhondda Cynon Taf, it seems a bit bizarre to join with Caerphilly, to be honest. You know, because the other thing is, although there may be problems in Rhondda Cynon Taf now, if we were to join with Merthyr, we could put them right. You know, we mustn't think that they'd take us over. It's a case of working together, really. And as for the parliamentary boundaries, because all the ward boundaries will alter, it's quite easy to alter the parliamentary boundaries, really. But the health service now, it would be bizarre to join with Caerphilly when we've got a Cwmtaf Health Service. It just seems bizarre, really, to join, you know, with Caerphilly. And I'm not sure Caerphilly would want to join with us anyway, but perhaps the leader could tell us whether they do or not. Thanks.
Councillor Howard Barrett.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I know I'm probably saying something with the Williams report, and obviously the minister we got now is trying to force these mergers. But where is the Labour Party in their bid? And that's what I've just had you know. Are we going to protect the residents of Merthyr? Why haven't they gone for a Hares Valley, a new authority? I know they said they weren't going to merge anyone, so why did they try and push for a new authority with our relative neighbours on the Heads of Valley?
Leader.
No, it's not a question, it should be a comment. We pass question.
Mr. Mayor, if I speak now, I'm going to close the debate, so I'll do it. Well, in that case, can I defer to Tony for a second?
Councillor Chaplin.
The current proposal for linking in with Rhondda Cynon Taf is based on a failed health authority. And that's why, and who was the author of that failed bid? Williams. His mind was made up for him
when he agreed to set up, which is an aberration, the Cwmtaf Health Authority. We were far better off when we had the North Glamorgan Trust.
Any other comments? Yeah, so, Leader?
But he's already spoken. Mr Deputy Mayor, to respond first of all to Councillor Barrett, Councillor Barrett clearly hasn't read any of the paperwork that's come out of the Welsh Government, in as much as no new authorities are going to be formed. So what we're trying to do here is work within the parameters that we've been set out, or that has been set out by Welsh Government. There are arguments for and against joining any authority. There is no doubt about that. But what I did say in the beginning was that in order to think this through properly, we really do need to think what we need to get out of the end of it. And that is getting better outcomes for the people that we represent. Councillor Matthews has pointed out that by joining with RCT, we wouldn't be far off the size of Cardiff. And to my mind, Clive, I don't know how much casework you do or how much you get about the constituency. I know you're busy, stuck in hospital most of the time, but clearly the bigger the constituency or the electoral division, with the reduction of councillors, the more work we will have to do in representing the constituents. That will become much harder, and we will have one very difficult job in doing that with all the other things that we're expected to do inside the civic centres. So we have tried to think this through as best we can. Bigger authorities certainly dilute accountability. I like being accountable to the electorate. It's their opportunity of telling us whether we do a good job or not. And when we go back to the very big councils as we did pre-96, quite frankly, it was extremely difficult getting hold of a local member then, because they were always away doing business, this, that and the other. I've moved the recommendations, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to leave it at that.
Can we put it to the vote, please? That's carried. We go on to item... We go on to committee report item 21, issuing of a section 188 letter to trade unions to consider a report of the chief executive. I believe it's the leader again.
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, Council is acutely aware that following Welsh Government's indicative settlement of minus 2.57% revenue funding for 2015-16, that we are currently faced with a funding deficit of £3 million with an accumulative indicative deficit of some £13 million for the period of 2015-16 to 2017-18. From section 1.3 of the report, Council will be aware that the letter from the Local Government Association and the subsequent meeting with councils from across Wales held in Llandudno Wells on October the 24th that overwhelmingly supported a 2.2% pay award to staff from January 2015 through to March 2016. Quite clearly, Mr Mayor, like all other councils from across Wales, this council has already made and will be forced to continue making some very difficult decisions as a result of the Westminster Coalition Government's decision to severely cut back on public services. From 1.4 and 1.5 of the report, members will be acutely aware that the proportion of staffing costs to net revenue budget is some 62%, and consequently consultation needs to take place with our trade union colleagues in reaching agreement to reduce employee numbers together with changes to terms and conditions and any other options. In the event that consultations with the trade unions fail to obtain a collective agreement, and in order to protect as many staff as possible, together with the interests of this council and the citizens of Merthyr Tydfil, the council has no choice whatsoever other than to issue a Section 188 letter immediately. This will not prevent meaningful discussions, Mr Deputy Mayor. It will, however, focus the discussions on credible and achievable proposals. And I must stress to staff that they should not see the issuing of a 188 as a threat, but as a procedural mechanism that will ultimately save jobs if all meaningful consultations with the trade unions fail. Moving on to Section 2 of the report, Council will note progress made to date, and in particular 2.4, the efforts made to redeploy staff wherever possible, evidence of which is highlighted in 2.6, in that to date only 2 members of staff have been made compulsory redundant. I would like to point out, Mr Deputy Mayor, there is an error in 2.3 of the report, in as much as there is no Table 2. It was part of an original working document. It doesn't need to be there. Section 3 on page 69 of the report sets out the staff who will be affected. Section 4 of the report, also on page 69, highlights the methods of achieving the changes and the timeline within which the changes need to take place if we are to achieve the necessary savings moving forward. In 4.3 and 4.4, Council will note that where there will need to be an alteration to terms and conditions, a collective agreement with the trade unions will be created wherever possible. This would require the respective unions to ballot their members, resulting in a yes vote. If a yes vote was achieved, the collective agreement would be implemented for 3 years, at which time the agreement would then be renegotiated. Section 4.11 sets out the timetable for consultation, and Council will note the 45 days, of which is the minimum statutory consultation period. However, this will be longer if the consultation has not been completed. Table A sets out the various stages and the dates for consultation and change. Disclosing information for the purpose of collective bargaining is set out in Section 5 on page 71 of the report, and members will note from the financial implications at 6.1, also on page 71, that at this stage the financial implications are as yet unknown, but will become clearer following a full functional analysis and budget service review that is currently taking place within all departments of the Council. Additional reports will follow as soon as possible when further information is available. Moving on to page 72, section 9 of the report, and to the recommendations, I move that 9.1, consultation with the trade unions commence with a view to creating a collective agreement, be approved. 9.2, the issuing of a Section 188 letter on the 6th of November 2014, so as to legally protect the Council if there is a need to impose the changes on the workforce or redundancies, be approved. 9.3, delegated authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader and in his absence the Deputy Leader of the Council to consult on and include options that may be raised and agreed with the trade unions, be approved.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I obviously wish to second the recommendations on page 72, and in so doing make reference again to the table on page 70 of the report, which shows you the timetable in order for us to get some things sorted before the start of the next financial year. Clearly, just to remind members, because of the settlement, we originally planned for something like 1.26, which has now gone down to minus 3.4, is clearly a situation that we have to deal with, giving us a major problem in the financial year 2015-16. Therefore, we have to introduce measures from the 1st of April 2015-16, and hence the need to protect the Council by issuing the Section 188 letters. I would sincerely hope that our continued discussions with the trade unions will deliver recommendation 9.1, and that is a collective agreement. However, given the position of particularly the Unison Union, I suspect that that will be a difficulty, and therefore it's all the more imperative that we actually issue the Section 188. I second the motion.
Questions? Councillor Richard Thomas.
Small technical question on page 69, Mr Deputy Mayor, if I may. It's section 3.3, which talks about not including school staff but intending to work with schools in realising the changes. I wonder if the leader would be kind enough to outline how he would go about that process, or whoever he would nominate to answer the question.
I think, Richard, I've got my own particular feelings on this, in as much as my own feeling is that I don't think we should be doing this, in as much as this is a race to the bottom. If school staff are not included, we shouldn't do it. However, in the interests of equality and fairness, it is the view has been taken, the collective view has been taken, that we should do this, but I'm not sure that we are able to implement it in any way, shape or form, and even if we were, not a penny piece would come back to this authority because of delegated school budgets. I'm not sure whether Lisa would like to elaborate on that, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Hi, we've had some discussions with the schools education department looking at this. Obviously there's some complications around the funding of schools, and I've had this ring fence to the schools. However, there is willingness, early days discussions really, looking at how we can include schools in potential changes to anything that might be terms and conditions. Although I must state that terms and conditions isn't the absolute focus of the consultation. If we cannot change terms and conditions, as are preferred. But if we do need to do that, then it's about how we undertake a more fair approach across the whole of the organisation. So we'd have to have further discussions with schools about how we can do that, if that comes up.
Sorry, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm glad to hear that there are discussions which would be ongoing, but can I urge that the local authority engages particularly with chairmen of governors of schools, because as we all know, and I know it's a small point when you consider all the other employees we are talking about, but we are still trying to push up standards of education, and what we don't want is to arrive at a point where the recruitment and retention of staff within the county borough almost becomes impossible, because people will look upon us, as they will in all directions and all staff, as something of a pariah in Wales, because we're out on our own doing this and not backed up by all the other local authorities.
Any other questions? Comments? I'll put it to the vote. That's carried. Item number 22, Tricati Landfill Site Profit Share, to consider a report from the Chief Executive, and again I believe it's the leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, this is the annual profit sharing agreement report in relation to Biffa Waste Services and their operation at Tricati Landfill site. Moving on, Mr Mayor, members will note from section 2 of the report that financial implications this year is that the council's contribution is £111,970. Historically, the Biffa profit share has been divided between all electoral divisions throughout the county borough, and members will be acutely aware of that, and have enjoyed Biffa funding for many years, although in recent years, Mr Deputy Mayor, for a number of reasons, this practice has at least in part stopped. Given the council's current financial pressures, and noting to a large extent the Foss of Ran funding enjoyed by all electoral divisions via the small, intermediate and large grant schemes, I am proposing that this year's Biffa profit share be utilised to look after our greatest asset, i.e. our staff, and to offset part of the proposed 2.2% pay award that was overwhelmingly agreed at a meeting in Llandrindod Wells on the 24th of October. Given the council's current financial position and the value we have for all staff of this council, Mr Deputy Mayor, I move that the Tricati Landfill site profit share of £111,970 be retained centrally to part finance the additional financial pressure within 2014-15 financial year arising from the 2.2% pay award effective from the 1st of January 2015 proposed by the national employers and trade unions.
Second, Mr Mayor. Deputy Mayor.
Questions? Comments? Sorry, comment? Councillor Richard Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I speak for myself at this point and not on the part of the group. It's up to them to vote in whichever way they feel, but I've never made any secret of the fact that I feel that these funds should always have come into central funds and been used far more strategically, and I certainly welcome the leader's comment about it looking after the most important asset that we have and being a contribution to the 2.2% pay rise. So I certainly will be voting for this paper.
Any other comments? I'll ask you to vote, please, councillors. That's been carried.
Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I wonder if I could have your permission to leave the chamber for a little while. I'll be back.
Yes, certainly.
Thanks.
We go to item number 23, overpayment of recovery policy 2014, to consider a report from the Chief Executive, and I believe it's Councillor Chris Barry taking this.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, at various times over the years we've had to make changes to the policy because of changes in legislation. This is one of those times. The only changes being affecting direct earnings, attachment orders and amendment to recovery rates for 2014-15. It's a very straightforward report, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to move recommendation 5.1 on page 76.
Have we got anybody to second that?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Questions? Have we got comments? I'll ask you to vote, please, councillors. That's been carried. Item number 24, confirmation of petition received to consider a report of the Chief Executive, and I believe it's Phil Williams, Councillor Phil Williams.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The purpose of this report is obviously to inform Council of a petition that's been received, and this petition expresses concern that customers of the Hale Gerrig newsagents are unable to park legally near the shop because of the existing double yellow lines, and requesting that the authority considers the creation of a parking space opposite the shop. The petition contains approximately 180 signatures, and that's been forwarded to the Corporate Director of Customer Services for his attention. All we're asking Council tonight is that on page 86 that the Council notes the petition received. I move.
Is there a second?
Yes, second, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Questions? Any comments? I'll put it to the vote.
I pressed the wrong button. Can I thank the Highways Department for prompt action with this petition. I have met with the residents, and the feasibility study is already being looked at into the request. So the council has come out on top on acting so promptly with this petition. Thank you very much.
Can everybody carry on voting, please? That's been carried. Item 25, approval of budget for ICT desktop, laptop and software refresh, and I believe it's Councillor David Jones. Sorry, it's Councillor Chris Barry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, as the report says,
Windows XP and Office 2003 became end of life early this year. Microsoft no longer releasing security updates. As a result of the agreement between the Cabinet Office and Microsoft, support and updates are continuing until April 2015 at a cost to this authority. And the supported software will result in breach of the public sector network code of connection, possibly resulting in disconnection of the service. Due to the nature of the impact on some of our essential services, this is not an option. For this financial year, funding up to a maximum of £172,000 is required to support the upgrading of the necessary systems to be financed from the Efficiencies Reserve. Subject to questions, Mr Deputy Mayor, I move recommendation 6.1 on page 88.
Mr Mayor.
Questions. I believe Councillor Richard Thomas has a question.
Just a brief one, Mr Mayor. Can I have reassurance from ICT if we support this that my laptop will work a little bit quicker than it does now?
And comments, please. Councillor Gareth Jones.
Looking in the wrong place.
Members will need to treat that as an amendment. So can somebody second the amendment? Thank you. Yeah, right. And as I'm advised that we don't have that facility to take that vote on the equipment, we'll need to have a show of hands on that, please. So can those in favour please vote?
Will we go into item 26, and I understand some councillors will be leaving on this item.
Deputy Mayor, could I make you aware of the time? I know quite a few councillors got their cars parked in the famous multi-storey car park, which the gates are going to close 8 o'clock. So either we've got to leave or can we have the gates delayed?
I think it may be open late because of the fireworks, but if you want, I'll go and check now. If you want.
Shall we proceed then for the time being?
I'll carry on then.
Has everybody left?
It's item 26, BIFA profit sharing scheme, and I believe it's Councillor Phil Williams taking. He's changed it to the leader.
It's not my fault this time.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, I move that the sums outlined in the report be granted to Plymouth Electoral Division and the Town Electoral Division.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, could you all vote again, please? Thank you, that's carried.
That's been carried. Go to item 27. Oh, sorry, yes, we'll have to wait till everybody comes back in, though. We move on to item 27, Dublin Declaration. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'll just keep this quite brief. This is a request for Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council to sign up to the Dublin Declaration. It's a pledge that is intended will be signed by councils across the UK and across Europe to promote more age-friendly communities. This is in line with the Older People's Strategy for Wales and other local and national policies. There will be some support and assistance available over time from the National Wales Ageing Well programme and the Generations Together Cymru programme. By signing the declaration, the Council will be able to participate in Wales-wide initiatives and access to European funding opportunities will be opened up. With this in mind, Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to rule the recommendations set out in 7.1 and 7.2 of the report on page 95, subject to members' questions.
Any questions?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and 7.3 on page 96.
Any questions? Any comments? Could you please vote? That's been carried. We'll go on to the information report at item 28, the Frossafran Community Fund. Is Councillor Toomey?
Yes, the report is just for information, Mr Mayor.
I go to item 29. Will somebody move a section 100?
Yes, I'm happy to move section 100, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Second, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Can all councillors vote, please? Can I ask the people in the public gallery to leave, please? I now reopen the session. Is Councillor Bill Smith still outside?
On the bus.
The other items, item 31, to deal with any other business or correspondence. I have correspondence here. Due to renovation work in St David's Church, robing will now take place in the Civic Centre from 1:30 on Sunday. And other item 32, to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor. I have none, so it's from me and my borrowed jacket. Good night.